Yo, what's good with y'all? Hope y'all doing well. I'm back from my unwanted hiatus, and in this video I'm going to show y'all how to make a beat for Drake and 21's recent project Her Loss. And this is going to be more of the dark and ambient type of style, similar to what like Oz and Metro did on the album. Per usual, I'm going to show y'all my entire process of making this beat from scratch. I'm not going to say too much else, and with all that being said, let's just hop right into the sample. Alright, so like I might have already mentioned, this is a whole lot simpler than most of the other samples and beats that I've made recently. All it really is just this one melody, like this bell or pad melody, and it's just the same thing but octave down in the intro and in some of the breaks that I have here. The main thing that really makes this melody is the sound selection and the effects. The MIDI is also important like it is in most melodies, but the elements that definitely really give this melody that type of character that Oz puts into his melodies is for sure the sound selection. So the sound that this is using is the Blur pad preset from the Experiment Club 1 Analog Lab Bank. So for this melody, like I said, it's pretty simple overall. I only really made like the first two measures, copied it over, made one minor change, and then just copied this first 4 for the entire 8-bar loop. The main thing that I'm using here is the minor triad and just a variation of it. So it might be a little more obvious if I move this up an octave. Some of y'all might be able to recognize this, and this is the minor chord in the key of C sharp minor. And so how you make this is you just start with your preferred root note. You want to copy this note up 3 half steps. So you want to count up 3 of these piano keys and then copy this using shift click and then move that up another 4 piano keys. And then so I've made this minor chord and I just took the top chord and then used control down arrow to move it down an octave. And then once I had that, I just added this D sharp note just to kind of build tension. Most of these dark beats use this kind of middle note and a half step down type of strategy to build tension because the notes in the scale that are half a step apart tend to build tension. So for example, like the 2 to 3 like we see here between D sharp and E, and then the 5 and 6, which is G sharp and A in this key. So what I ended up doing is I just copied these 2 notes over. Instead of G sharp being the top note, I put it as F sharp and just left it here instead of moving it down an octave. And then I brought back that D sharp and put it up, and then just took this D sharp and had it be the entire half of the second chord. So like I said earlier, I took that and copied it over for the 3rd and 4th measures. And the main difference is instead of having the G sharp hit in the octave here, I just took A and had it hit 1 beat after the D sharp came in. So before putting effects on it, this is what the melody now sounds like. So putting the effects on it, like I said earlier, this is probably the next most important thing after the sound selection. The first effect I put on it was a low cut just to cut out the key noises. The next effect I put on it was RC20 on the Lush and Crunch Guitar 2 preset. Then I added Portal on the Wave preset from Max Shooter's Wave Scrape Bank. And then I put some halftime on all the default settings. And then I added Shaperbox 2 on the Better Sound preset. So with all the effects, this is what the melody now sounds like. So now that dark undertone is really starting to come out and all those effects really help it kind of flesh out a little bit. So once I did that, I went back to the mixer to the same track that I added the effects to, and then I hit this dot right here and turned it red to arm it, and then hit Alt R on my keyboard, set the mode to pattern, cut the remainder, and hit start. So once I had that rendered out, I dragged that audio clip into the playlist here, and then I double clicked on it, I set the mode to stretch, and then I pitched it up by 200 cents or 2 half steps. So the key of the final beat ended up being in D sharp minor. So once I had this version of it, what I ended up doing is I highlighted it using right click and dragging it on the top here, and then I routed that to a mixer track using Control L, and then did the same thing that I did before where I armed the mixer track and then hit Alt R to render it out. So once I had my rendered out audio clip, I put that into the playlist. I dragged it down over here to keep the normal pitch version, and then I clicked on the top left of this one and then hit Make Unique. Once I did that, I double clicked on it, set the mode to stretch again, and then put this pitch range to 12, and then put the knob all the way to the left so it puts it down by 12 semitones or 1 octave. As for the melodics in the sample, that's really it. It's just those 2 stems, the octave down and the octave up version of that melody. After that, I put my drums on it, and that was pretty much the rest of the beat. So starting off with the drums, the first thing I added was the snare. and I had this hit on the third beat of every measure, but then I also added this kind of stutter on the snares on the second and sixth measure, and this will make a little more sense when I go to the next pattern, but this is what it sounds like as is. So after adding that first snare, I added another one, and this fills in that gap on the second and sixth measures from the last snare. After that, I added my hi-hat sound. As for the pattern for this one, I tried to keep it fairly straightforward. I only really added just a handful of rolls to it, and then I also switched up the velocities a little bit on some of the notes just to add a little bit of my own bounce to it. But for the most part, I think these rolls are all using the 1/3 step snap to grid. So after adding the hi-hats, I put in my kick sound. And with this one, as you can tell, I adjusted the velocities quite a bit, and this was mainly just to add some extra bounce to the kicks. And in my opinion, this is a good way to add some extra bounce to the low end of your beats. After adding the kick, I put in this open hat, and this is just meant to layer an accent with some of the kicks and the 808s. So then after adding the open hat and the kick, I put in my 808 patterns. Both the patterns are pretty similar. I think the primary differences are just in these rolls here at the end. With this first one, I wanted to put the high roll in the middle, and I think in the second one, the high rolls at the end and the low rolls in the middle. Overall for this one, I didn't want to make the 808 too similar to the kick. Instead of layering directly with the kick, I wanted it to kind of complement it. And since we're already kind of at a faster tempo, I wanted to keep it a little bit on the simpler side just so that it's easier to kind of flow on if somebody's rapping to it. Here's the second 808 pattern using the same 808 sound. So that's it for the actual sounds itself. I'll briefly go over my arrangement because some of y'all are asking me in the comments how I arrange my beats. I put in these tags here at the top so it's a little easier to kind of track where I'm at. Usually I'll start with an intro. This will be 8 to 16 measures. Sometimes I'll cut it kind of short, like 2 or 4. Then I'll put in the hook. This is anywhere from 8 to 16 measures. The verse is typically around 16 to 24 measures. I'll throw in the bridge just to switch it up a little bit and then just start again with the hook and repeat that pattern. And then the outro is pretty much just like an extended bridge when it comes to the sound selection. With the hook, I'm pretty much playing almost all the sounds, and it's probably the busiest part, which makes sense because lyrically this is going to be the part where it's the simplest. For the verse, I tried to keep this a little bit simpler just so there's more room for the artist to rap on it. And then for the bridge, like I said, it's just a switch up. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. But overall, that's just pretty much how I made the beat and arranged it. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking to the end if you made it this far. I hope y'all were able to find this tutorial helpful. Leave any recommendations or feedback for me in the comments. And that's going to round out this video. So I'll see you on the next one. Peace.